Good afternoon and welcome to Seminar and Kuliah Umum with Mubyarto Public Policy Forum today. On behalf, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Christian Lee, and I would extend a warm welcome to all of you for taking time to attend this event. We have a very exciting topic on the political economy of tobacco control in Indonesia, so please sit back and enjoy your seminar for today. For the next agenda, I would very welcome to our first representative of VNU Indonesia project. For the next, we're going to hear welcoming remarks from the representative of NU Indonesia project.
Thank you. Selamat siang, Bapak-bapak, Ibu-ibu sekalian, rekan-rekan. Good afternoon, everyone attending this Mubyarto Policy Forum here and online. I'm very happy to be here again. This is the first Mubyarto Forum since 2019 that we held online. The last time was also in this room. And I'm going to start by talking about Mubyarto Forum. This forum, the Mubyarto Policy Forum, is an annual event and named in honor of Professor Mubyarto, a prominent economist at Gadjah Mada University, and one of Indonesia's most influential intellectuals on the issue of rural development between the 60s and 1990s. And this is a collaboration between the Faculty of Economics, University of Gadjah Mada University, and ANU Indonesia project, and with aims to stimulate debate on the development policy issues, particularly on rural development. Now, the first Mubyarto Forum was held in 2017. Professor Budiono, the former Vice President of Indonesia, delivered the keynote address in that lecture. Now, again, this is the first time we did in person in 2019, and we would like, on behalf of NU Indonesia project, I would like to thank FEB UGM for the great collaboration and to continue along into the future. We already have a topic for the 2024. And I'm going to take a few minutes also to introduce Indonesia project for those of you who is not familiar with the project. So, it's founded in 1965 by Heinz Arndt, and now is hosted at the Arndt Department of Economics, Crawford and School of Public Policy, and it's a research center for policy development and graduate training, and with the aims to contribute to stronger research-based development policies in Indonesia. And we do that by a number of our activities. One of them is can fall under the research capacity, which include PhD supervision, teaching, and anyone who's interested in continuing their studies abroad, the masters or PhD, our staff, ANU staff, Indonesia project staff also supervise students. And we do a lot of dissemination of research findings, one of which is this Mubyarto Forum. Okay, and every year we also run the Indonesia Update Conference, and the last one we did last month was on governing urban Indonesia. Please. So, NU Indonesia project also hosts BS, the Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies, and is the leading journal on Indonesia's economic and society. And our impact factor now is 4.1, and we're ranked number 2 in area studies and in the 98th percentile, and we're also in Q1 in economics. Okay, so please try to send your high quality research to us. Now, next year, we already have an agenda for the Indonesia update. It will be on the 10 years of Jokowi presidency, and details will be coming soon. As usual, out of that update, we also published the Indonesia Update book series, which will usually will be launched within a year after the update. Okay. Thank you. So that's it's my spiel. Now we're getting ready to the event. Should I start or?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Firman. I would also, it's a pleasure for me to start and introduce our panel of experts on the political economy of tobacco control in Indonesia. Dr. Firman Witoelar from NU, Professor Hasbullah Thabrany from University of Indonesia and National Committee on Tobacco Control, Dr. Elisabeth Kramer from Universitas South Wales, and followed by Dr. Gumilang Sahadewo from University Gadjah in Mada. Without further ado, I would like to turn over the stage to our moderator. The stage is yours. Thank you.
So now I'm wearing a different hat now. So I'll be chairing and moderating this panel. Very efficient. So we have three distinguished speakers, and I'm going to introduce them briefly. The first one, and you can please start, take a seat here. The first one who will be speaking is Professor Hasbullah Thabrany, who is a professor of public health in University of Indonesia. He's now also the chairperson of Komisi Tobacco Control, Pengendalian Tobacco, and he's also the president of Indonesia Health Economic Association. Now, Professor Thabrany was a key member, just in case you don't know this, in the design of the Indonesia's National Health Insurance, JKN. And he received his Doctor of Public Health degree from the University of California in Berkeley, USA. Please, Professor Thabrany. So Professor Thabrany will be talking about the state of play of tobacco control in Indonesia, the challenges that was faced by, based on his experience in Komisi Tobacco Control, discussing the areas where it has made good progress and the areas where they have stalled. And our second speaker, welcome Elisabeth Kramer, who is a senior lecturer in the School of Social Sciences, University of New South Wales, Australia. She is a Cynthia Fellow and a 2023 recipient of the prestigious ARC Discovery Early Career Researcher Awards, DECRA, for her research on the politics of tobacco policy in Indonesia. So she's a very right person to talk in this forum. Please, Elisabeth. And she'll be talking about the complexity of tobacco policy control, looking at how theory linked with the practice, with what is in practice in Indonesia. And the third speaker is Gumilang Sahadewo. I probably do not need to introduce him here. He is an associate professor in economics and associate dean in this faculty, Fakultas of Economics and Bisnis, University of Gadjah Mada. And one of his research interests is in the economics of tobacco control. And he currently investigates the livelihood of current and former tobacco farmers in Indonesia and the effect of tobacco on tobacco consumption and on stunting. And he received his PhD in economics from the University of Pittsburgh. Please, Gumilang. And Gumilang will take economics point of view and looking at tobacco control issues. So without further ado, please, Professor Hasbullah. Yes. Yeah. You have 30 minutes.
Yeah? 30 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank for our colleague here in FEB to invite me as the chair of, we call it Komnas Pengendalian Tembakau, Komite Nasional Pengendalian Tembakau, Tobacco Control. I was mentioned as professor. Yeah. Actually, I'm retired, but my colleague often call me still Prof. I always remind them, maybe you too, that you call Prof in Bahasa Indonesia using F, but this time Prof with using V. So that means provocator. Because I have no retirement on this provocator. So I would like also to provoke today to thinking about this tobacco control. By chance, we just celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Komnas PT. Okay, yeah, first I would like to just memorizing Prof. Mubyarto, in my view, is the hero on this. Pak Elan worked mostly on the poverty alleviation. He had a very big concern on this, the poverty people. I remember during the development of the National Social Security Law, he had very strong support on this to reduce poverty. Yeah, that's important element. Yeah. By chance, the smoking also is the second biggest factor in making people poor. Yeah. So, and therefore, I think this is very appropriate moment. I just want to introduce the NCTC. It's an NGO. We are not the government or public entity. It is a government supporting by those 23 organizations. Comprising of those who are in the health sector, the education, such as Perhimpunan Guru, the Teacher Association, and many young generation also. First of all, since I took this, the state of play is the paradox of the policy making. We're talking about the political economy. Political economy always involved in this decision-making, public policy. The first paradox, I would say, to my knowledge, in developing policy, in economic policy, we always use evidence, right? But in tobacco control, we don't know. Evidence a lot. We distribute a lot. Yeah, I think Gumilang and Lisa will give you more evidence later on. But when we observe the final one, this is the unique one. In Indonesia, FCTC violate our sovereignty. Apa namanya? Meniadakan kedaulatan. It's difficult to understand why, but later on maybe you can understand better. Yeah. Just to make sure that we have evidence, it is not evidence in Indonesia, it is from the US surgeon in celebrating 50 years tobacco control in the US. So the US Surgeon General, the equivalent Minister of Health here, produced this book. I think you can still download. It's 1,100 pages. It's very good. Identifying from various research which diseases are as consequences of smoking. That's the list of the disease, yeah, for active smoker, and this is for passive smoking. So that's evidence. We cannot deny on that one. And therefore, if everywhere you fly, you always ban to smoke in the airplane, right? That's evident because of the destroying your health and other people's health. Even if 10 million milliliter liquid of nicotine consumed by people, just you will die right away because of the toxic of the nicotine. But nicotine in the market, in the cigarette, has a low concentration, even in the electronic cigarette, very low concentration, not kill you, but make you feel happy. That's the problem. Make you feel happy and create addiction. That's the unique characteristic of this product. This is some just quote from the internet, how these people say that sovereignty, people's sovereignty, our nation's sovereignty is above. What I think this is a paradox, because it's only Indonesia that has not signed FCTC. Why only our government feel this is below or above the sovereignty, mengganggu kedaulatan? All other countries, all other world, other leaders in the world already signed. They don't feel that. Australia, Japan, China, Korea, German, UK, yeah. So it is a big black box, what's happening there. Yeah. Although evidence a lot, but the policy is still there. So this is the situation. A couple years back, I used it. As you see here, is Indonesians. Now is close friend with Somalia, small country, who said the same thing. They're small countries, not a big economy. Yeah. Until now, we have not signed FCTC. Why? FCTC is a framework on the commitment of the country who signed that we will control the addictive substance. It's not banning cigarette, just controlling, reducing, informing people, providing treatment, educating people. That's the content of this FCTC. And also increasing price. This is the economic instrument of the FCTC, increasing price, excise tax, to reduce affordability of the low-income people, to make them prioritize their consumption to other nutritious product, not the addictive product like a cigarette. But what happened in Indonesia, BPS annually produce report on the consumption. The smoking is the second. I think Lisa knows very well about this with Abdillah, who have been always doing that. So tobacco becoming the second kebutuhan pokok after beras. That's while there is no use consumption. These people, this is the poor people. I think here too, I often, when I stay in Gadjah in the morning walking, find some energy, and found everywhere people smoke, low income people smoke. They are trapped in this addiction. Very difficult to come out from this addictive, because that's the nature of the chemical of nicotine. The problem then, second part of why the government, the country is not provide environment that making them easier to quit from this situation, making them less contact with this substance. So this is about FCTC, preventing people to purchase unnecessary, maybe in Indonesia we call it mubazir, spending mubazir. In Egypt, the ulama there already issuing fatwa, saying that producing, consuming, and selling cigarette is haram since 1980s. Yeah, but Indonesia, no, not that one. This is the situation where you can see here in this graph, Indonesia still, sorry, I use this one maybe. I have another one. Yeah, Indonesia, smoking still prevalence at even increasing since the last 20 years, a little bit increasing from 35%, the highest. Even in China, there's prevalence low, and in other countries, Australia, certainly decreasing, but we still increasing. Why? That's probably because we don't comply fully with the FCTC. We do comply with some action of the FCTC, especially the latest one, raised cigarette tax. Yeah, and therefore you can see the share of adult smoking in Indonesia is only few with the dark one. Yeah. Yeah. While the company is making a lot of money. So this is the annual report of Philip Morris, the US-based company, buying Sampurna. So last year, this company earned 111 trillion rupiah, one company. You know, at that time, last year, the budget of Minister of Health, you can see later on, this one company. So while those people, the low income cannot quit, still trapped in this buying smoking every day, these people in this company is making a profit, not other company, also others. Yeah. So that's the paradox. And the other paradox is that many policymakers praise the tobacco industry as contributing to the nation economy. I said, look, how much they contribute. Some people mistaken this revenue of excise tax as cigarette contribution. No. Yeah, they contribute basically only PPH badan, the pajak pendapatan from the profit, right? This is they pay to the government as many other companies, the same thing. So there is no special contribution. This the amount of money. This is just I just want to show you what one public company, the Philip Morris, 14 trillion rupiah in 2019 as the net profit, bringing back to the US or many other shareholders, while 20, 30 years from now, we have to pay all these consequences of healthcare problem. Yeah, it's long term. At this time, they earn it. If we look at this 2019, this company sold or earned revenue 106 trillion. It's, in my view, it is non-productive spending, right? What for? There is no calorie, no protein for brain. Yeah, not used. This is just waste. The harmful. In English, they call it harmful consumption. Yeah, the haram. We let those people spend 106 trillion for this company. And about half of them is cukai. Cukai is not contribution of this company. Cukai is the penalty for those people who have poor healthy behavior. Because it is harmful, they still consume, and therefore we ask them to pay more. The company just channeling the money. It's not they are the one who. But mistakenly, many policymakers said, "Oh, this is contribution from the industry." No, it is contribution from the low income that smoking daily. Maybe from some of us, because we are supposed to pay that one. How much we pay that? Not much compared to in Australia. Yeah. So this is this year the government target to have 240 trillion rupiah from the excise, yeah, but 95% coming from cigarette. Huge money, yeah. How much the government allocates this year for health? Any observation? Yeah. Later on we can see. Yeah. Okay. And in many countries, you can see Australia, because Lisa is here on the right. In 2018, already tax cigarette above 75% of the price. Indonesia, you can see the colors, it's between 25 to 50% on average. Yes, still valid until now since the tax excise law. But if you look at back in 2008, Australia was not that high because they keep increasing the tax to reduce affordability of those people to use. But Indonesia remained the same. So that's no big progress in making this tax revenue increase. If you can see also the death rate and coming to from the cigarette-related disease and cancer, the treatment, all these countries who are working hard to reduce consumption is decreasing. But you can see the data for Indonesia still flat. While evidence are there, but the policy is still not in line with this evidence. This is another action that NCTC advocate that to ban on advertising. You can see Indonesia still in the same way after more than a decade. Yeah. Other countries already moving. The question, why other countries can do it? Why not Indonesia? Evidence are there. Yeah. You can see also in quit smoking, we a little bit better currently because we are pushing the Ministry of Health to provide UBM, usaha berhenti merokok in health center, in clinic. But few people do because they are already addicted. Unless we push them in an environment that push them to reduce smoking. Yeah. On the other hand, the industry, certainly industry want to keep the market and the luck, the cuan is still there. Yeah. So they throw it all these arguments saying that if we strongly control tobacco consumption or cigarette, they're going to be massive layoff of the healthcare. I think Pak Gumilang will talk more later on more. I will not spell out that one. Killing tobacco farmers. I did several studies. I visited Temanggung, Jawa Timur, NTB in the last decade. Also a friend of Lisa, Abdillah. The result, couple years back, maybe you saw, there was a big banner, I think in Temanggung, in the tobacco area, posting one of my picture there. The enemy of tobacco in tobacco farmers, very big photo. Myself, Emil Salim, at that time, Abdillah also, yes. So that's the situation because they're provoking. Yeah. Now I'm becoming provocateur because I want to provoke the counter-provocation. Yeah, and then important revenue and illicit trade. Yeah, that's the issue that always we're facing. I discussed with the Commission 11 in the Parliament, DPR. They're always raising these four issues. Yeah. Yeah. So there are a lot of many paradox in that. What we see is that data showing clearly that cigarette killing people. Cigarette make people poor and maintain the poor. And even recent studies showing that strongly correlate with stunting and others. We, Pak Elan give all the lot of BLT, right? But the smoking rate of those people who receive BLT is higher than others. Is it subsidizing to smoke or what? Yeah, that's evident there. Yeah, this is the result that we can show you. This the revenue this year targeted 245 trillion from excess cigarette smoking. The oil subsidy 210 trillion rupiah. The healthcare budget only 160 trillion. So it's much less. So this country like, okay, you smoke, you get money, and the money subsidized because the money, the smoking cigarette kill your health, making you not healthy. And let's subsidize oil to make even the air pollution become worse. And that's the kind of thinking that we can see in this country is happening. Yeah. Okay. So this just some data. Just recently we did a survey to people expecting basically that the new president will have some concerns on this tobacco. So awareness is there. This is what we are fighting in the Komnas, Committee Tobacco Control. Just raise awareness of the people, then people will push new policy in the right way. Yeah. These new books also, one is published by Komnas, the other one by Center for Social Security UI on this tobacco, in the just coincidentally about the same year. Yeah, that you can use this as a reference for that. I think because Firman already remind me the times it's almost. No, 5 minutes. I think let the audience think and make a conclusion and recommendation. Because you guys smart one, why should I tell you conclusion, recommendation? You can take your conclusion. And recommendation is, let's do something to help that low-income people exit from this circulus vitiosus, yeah, lingkaran setan. That's difficulty. Let them, if we cannot take them out from this environment, we can ask the government to provide better environment so they don't smoke, making expensive cigarette, making iklan or advertising far from school, yeah. Because if you look at the all warung near the school, they put a banner on the cigarette with low price and so on, asking parents, our family, not to use, not to start smoking, asking our parents who smoke, don't ask the children to buy cigarette. Often the father asking, and we let them, and if you sell it cigarette, don't sell it to the kids. Yeah, that will help in the future. As academicians, certainly do more research and advocate, provide scientific evidence, and advocate the government, the legal makers in the DPR, DPRD to be more advocator to reduce smoking, and also expanding effective smoke-free areas in all public facilities. I think in all district level, that's easier to manage because there is no national interest on the economic interest. I think enough, Pak Firman. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Thabrany. So I think they are correct that you are really a provocateur, but with evidence. Okay, now listen, please, you have also 30 minutes.
Just wait for my slides. There they are. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Selamat sore. Terima kasih kepada ibu-ibu, bapak-bapak, mahasiswa-mahasiswi yang hadir pada sore ini. I'd like to thank UGM, FEB, and the ANU Indonesia project for inviting me to speak at this forum. It's such a kind invitation, and they've been very accommodating. I had some small hiccups with my flight this morning, getting to Gadjah, but the team has been so wonderful and welcoming and helping me navigate that. So thank you so much for your hospitality. I'm very honored to be here, and if I'm honest, I'm a little bit nervous to be in this company, but hopefully I can shine some light on this issue and give you some other aspects of the policy-making problem to think about. For my talk today, I'm going to be covering quite a few different ideas, but I'll be focusing this paper mostly on exploring the policy-making context in Indonesia in terms of informal and formal institutions. And these are the institutions that shape what is possible in Indonesia and what is desirable in Indonesia. And this really guides the way that the government thinks about tobacco regulation. So some of this is a little bit of repetition from Prof. Hasbullah's talk, but I'll go through it anyway. So when we're thinking about what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve here? It's a problem on many levels. So what is the problem that we're actually trying to address when we think about tobacco control policy? It's a problem that many other countries have faced, so Indonesia is not unique in that sense, but there are many aspects of the issue in Indonesia that make it quite special compared to other countries. But if we go back to the basic problem, we have a problem firstly for consumers, for individuals. As Prof. Hasbullah has already mentioned, smoking is linked to several negative health outcomes and diseases. And of course, not everybody who smokes will become sick or die from smoking, but the risk factors are much higher if you're a smoker compared to somebody who doesn't smoke. Secondly, nicotine, which is found in cigarettes, is a very addictive substance. The high that you get from nicotine is also very fleeting. So it means that your cravings for cigarettes are very strong and very often. So that means that when people want to quit, it can be very difficult for them. So we need to have targeted support and intervention to help people who want to quit. If they don't have support, the likelihood that they will relapse into smoking again is very high. Beyond the individual, there are other impacts at more macro levels. So, for example, within family and community systems, the impact of illness or death from smoking may be felt very broadly and have wider socio and cultural and economic impacts. And this is particularly the case in Indonesia, where the majority of smokers are men. And in societies that still have dominant heteronormative dynamics, where the man is the head of the household or the main breadwinner, having that individual become sick or pass away can put a huge economic strain on the rest of the family. So the illness not only affects the individual, but it also affects the family and the community around them. Even more macro than this is the negative impacts to the state. Again, Prof. Hasbullah has touched on these, but smoking-related illnesses and death can lead to decreased productivity within the workforce and an increase in cost of care through social security systems that are sponsored by the government. and also, and we don't think about this very much, but also environmental impacts that come from the pollution associated with cigarettes, and particularly cigarette butts that can clog waterways and make drainage systems much more, that can affect drainage systems and increase flooding and other kinds of environmental impacts like that. On an ethical level, part of the issue with smoking is that we need to think about where the government responsibility lies here. So yes, the tobacco industry does create jobs, but do those workers and farmers become insanely wealthy from being a part of the tobacco industry? No, they don't. The people who become millionaires are people who are elites, people who are already rich, or the money that goes outside of Indonesia to multinational corporations like Philip Morris. So it's not those people that the government should be protecting and supporting, but regular citizens and people who are vulnerable to the impacts of negative consequences of smoking. And finally, part of the problem is political will. So there is an argument about intervention which is wrapped up in ideas of personal choice, that smokers should have the right to smoke if they want to, and it's not the government's place to intervene in the personal autonomy of individuals to make those decisions. There's also the question of this being such a complicated issue. So if you're a government that wants to regulate this issue, where do you start? Like, what's your starting point? Now, the FCTC that Prof. Hasbullah talked about does provide some guidance on this, but as we've heard, Indonesia is not a signatory to that particular convention, and is the only country in Asia that hasn't ratified it to date. So we can see that there are issues of political will coming through from the very beginning. So returning to my last point, that governments may lack political will, and smoking is a choice that individuals make. I think that this particular argument falls down when we are talking about vulnerable communities. A lot of the people who smoke are not in a position to necessarily make the best decisions for themselves, and I'm thinking particularly about children here who do become targeted by the cigarette industry. So maybe some of you might remember, or maybe you're a little bit too young, I'm not sure, but there was a young boy, Adi Rizal, who was the smoking baby. He became famous around the world because he was a toddler who was also a chain smoker, and he had a very serious addiction to cigarettes. Now, I don't think that this is normal. Well, I hope it's not normal in Indonesia. But the fact that it's even possible for a small 3-year-old boy to become addicted to cigarettes really reflects some of the deep policy gaps within Indonesia, and I think that the government needs to step up and play a bigger role in protecting vulnerable communities from this harmful product. So we have seen a variation on this slide, but just to contextualize again, Indonesia does have a comparatively high rate of smokers. Also, the prevalence of daily smoking is quite high compared to other countries around the world. And then if we look at the local studies and the statistics that have come out of that, there's a much higher prevalence amongst men than women, which I think we can see with our own eyes when we go out, but also that's reflected very strongly in the statistics. And we have seen what looks like a decrease in the rate of, in the prevalence of smoking amongst females, which is good. We've also seen in the latest BPS statistics that it looks like maybe there's been a slight drop in prevalence, but we'll have to wait for further surveys to see if there's a downward trend or maybe if this is an anomaly. The BPS statistics also suggest that there are approximately 70 million smokers in Indonesia. And there are also some very concerning statistics about youth smoking. So some of these are a bit old, but I think any proportion of children, people under the age of 18 smoking is not a good sign, and particularly when we also think about issues of stunting and growth, which smoking can affect. So I think this graphic, which we also already saw, tells the compelling story of why more government intervention is needed on this issue. And particularly, I want to highlight the different trajectories between Indonesia and Australia here. So if you look at the graph, actually in the 1990s, there was a relatively similar starting point for these two countries in terms of the deaths attributable to smoking. But in the early 1990s in Australia, there was a big shift in a bunch of policies related to tobacco control. So there was a ban on advertising, which was made a complete ban in the late 1990s. There was higher taxes and excises placed on cigarettes to the extent that now, I think if you want to buy a packet of cigarettes in Australia, it's about $45 maybe. So 450,000 rupiah for one packet of cigarettes. Yeah, it's expensive. There are also smoke-free areas across the country, and generally the government is doing everything that they can to make smoking very difficult and unappealing, which is part of the purpose of tobacco control policy. Whereas in Indonesia, there are policies, of course, but they haven't been so stringent. And so we can see the diversion in trajectories here, where Indonesia remains relatively the same in terms of death rate, whereas Australia has decreased significantly. And I think essentially this is the fundamental basis, or fundamental argument for why government intervention is necessary, because essentially it will save people's lives. And they're not strangers, they're people that I know, they're people that you know, people that we all see on a daily basis are affected by this issue. So government intervention becomes really important on a social level, on an economic level, and on a personal level as well. So I'm going to move on now to some of the socio-political contexts and economic contexts. I'll try and keep this brief because, again, Prof. Hasbullah has covered some of it. But firstly, of course, the argument that one of the main arguments that we often hear about pushing back against tobacco control policies is the number of jobs that are associated with the industry. And the idea that if you threaten the industry, if you threaten production, then that means that the livelihoods of people who are involved in the industry will be affected. And there are two types of jobs that are usually involved here. Firstly, you have the tobacco farmers, and then you have the factory workers and the production workers who either hand roll, but probably more likely to oversee the machines that make cigarettes and then distribute them. So there were some statistics that were released in 2009 from the Ministry of Industry, which estimated 5.98 million jobs are created by tobacco companies annually. I think we would need to learn a little bit more about how they got those statistics, but even if it was an exaggeration, that's still millions of people. And on top of that, another interesting point of context is that most of the cigarette factories and jobs are concentrated in Java. Yes, there is production in other parts of Indonesia, but it's mostly in Java. And Java, of course, as you all know, is the largest voting population in Indonesia. So when you think about politicians making policies about tobacco control, if they're from Java, Central Java, East Java, they're going to be thinking very carefully about whether it's going to affect their political reputation amongst voters. So there's some tension there as well. The next issue, of course, is the argument about tax and excise generation. So this is the Ministry of Finance. In 2022, the projected target for excise was 193 trillion rupiah, or approximately 12.9 billion US dollars. And that seems like a lot of money. I don't have that much money. It seems like a lot of money to me. But you can understand why policymakers within the Ministry of Finance might feel a bit nervous about tighter regulations if this income stream was to be threatened. But there are counter-arguments to this. Prof. Hasbullah has made several of them. The real costs of smoking far outweigh the economic income that these products generate for the government. And there are also issues of productivity. And these are arguments that really do support stricter tobacco controls, but the Ministry of Finance has been a little bit, indecisive or non-committal about this particular issue. So the Minister of Finance herself identified 5 considerations in making tobacco tax. The first one was to decrease consumption, which, yes, that's great for tobacco control, but the other 4 were the impact on workers in the tobacco sector, the impact on tobacco farmers, the need to ensure that higher prices doesn't lead to an increase in illegal trade of cigarettes, and then also the need to consider government revenue and budget. So out of those 5 justifications and reasons, only one of them really speaks to tobacco control and public health. So there's this tension between economics and public health in the political discourse. Okay, so pro-industry arguments also draw on ideas of economic nationalism because the tobacco industry in Indonesia is largely domestic. But beyond that, in terms of its cultural significance, one of the big differences between Indonesia and other countries is that I don't think that there's any other country that can claim a national indigenous cigarette, unlike Indonesia with kretek, right, with the combination of tobacco and cloves, which Indonesian cigarette companies really like to market as being a national product, an Indonesian product. So whenever there are arguments about tobacco control, there's always a little bit of pushback about that in terms of nationalism and cultural identity. So it becomes a protectionist rhetoric for companies to say, you know, the government should be protecting and preserving national industries. We are a national industry, so we deserve your support and your protection. Now, you might agree with that, you might disagree with that, but that's definitely something that gets talked about. So I want to turn now to some of the complexities in the process. I hope I don't run out of time. So the first point to make is that when we look at who's responsible for tobacco control, there are multiple institutions. I'm sorry, the text is quite small. But this is from a paper that I wrote with Dr. Abdillah Ahsan from Universitas Indonesia and Vaughan Rees from the Global Center for Tobacco Control. And we identified several ministries and institutions that have an interest or a responsibility related to tobacco control. So the President's Office, 6 national ministries and 1 independent agency, and we call this the policy mix. So the main industries are finance, health, communication and information, and trade and industry, and also the Ministry for National Development Planning, Bappenas, also has some role as the implementing agency for the National Development Plan. But evidence that we collected for this study shows that the interministerial collaboration, so the discussions between the different ministries, was not very coherent, it wasn't very productive, and there's a difference in commitment between the different ministries. So there's already not an overarching shared commitment amongst the government, the institutions in the government itself. Another institutional factor is that policy making operates on multiple scales of government. So you have the DPR in Jakarta and then the DPRD and multiple institutions in between, and feasibly all of these institutions could implement some form of tobacco control. But I think it's safe to say that for most government, legislative and executive offices, tobacco control only really becomes a concern when there's top-down pressure to implement them. So in a study that I did with some colleagues from the Aliansi Akademisi Komunikasi Indonesia untuk Pengendalian Tembakau, we found that in a study of kawasan tanpa rokok or smoke-free areas, the implementation of those regulations really depended on the political will and local commitment of people within the DPRD, and in a lot of places that was lacking. So the process of drafting local regulations is time-consuming, it's resource-intensive, it's expensive. You need your special commission, your pansus, you need your naskah academic, you need your drafts, there's debate. So it can take a long time, even if there is political will. But minus political will, it can be drawn out for years, and there are many districts that still don't have regulasi tentang KTR in Indonesia. The final point that I want to make, and this is one for the policy students in the room, you've probably seen this picture before, is that the complexities of policy creation can also lie at different points of the process. So you have all of these different stages when it comes to policy making, and this is an idealized model, of course. In reality, policy sometimes doesn't follow this, but it's a good way of thinking about where intervention and influence can occur. So each point of this policy cycle represents not only an important step in the process, but an opportunity for interference. So what do I mean by this? For example, even if you look at the very first step of agenda setting, in Indonesia, tobacco companies spend so much money on advertising, on CSR programs, on branding, on sponsorships. Their aim isn't just to hook consumers, but it's also to build a positive brand and sentiment. So even if you're not a smoker, if you feel neutral or maybe even positive towards the tobacco industry, you're going to be less likely to push your political representatives to create policies to address this issue. And the tobacco industry is very smart about this. Their advertising campaigns are so clever and very insidious, and they're playing with our minds. They're trying to convince us that this is not a big deal, that we don't need to put in place these strict restrictions. We don't need to worry about children taking up smoking. It's all to do with that. The idea is it's fun. It gives you, confidence. It gives you these different things. So as long as that positive perception is there, the first step, the agenda setting step, is already, tobacco control is already at a disadvantage. Another example might be companies using their influence to put particular issues on the agenda, like, for example, the draft tobacco law that was put to the DPR in 2016, I think. It was not passed, it failed, but it was also a very bizarre law that I don't know exactly what kind of mission it was trying to fulfill, compared to some of the other very important laws that were also being discussed at that time. So to summarize, there are multiple points of intervention and complexity, and this leads to a number of potential outcomes. The first is confusion. So when you have so many different parts of the institution with various different responsibilities, it can be very difficult to come up with a cohesive and coherent approach. It's also easier to shift responsibility or dodge responsibility. So if a ministry says, we don't think that's really our issue, we think that's the Ministry of Industry, then they can pass, it's easier to pass responsibility to others if there's no overarching framework. This can also lead to inertia. So business as usual policies will almost undoubtedly benefit the industry over tobacco control. So even if they can't affect the end policy, delaying it, making it slow, making it difficult, that's still a benefit for them. So that's inertia. There's also incoherence when you have institutional actors who take as their starting point their self-interest rather than the interest of the whole of the community. So in that case, it's going to be very difficult to create a cohesive and coherent framework because the regulations have to speak to each other. They have to work together in concert. And at the moment, you have ministries making their own individual policies, but not necessarily thinking about the goals of the government at large. So I've got 18 seconds. I think, like, it's okay. I think, like Prof. Hasbullah, I might just leave this slide with you. I think the one thing that I do want to say is that if the government was to make a strong commitment, one of the things that they really need to think about is transitioning people who are in the industry into other jobs. And that's going to take a long time. It's going to be expensive. It's going to require the best and brightest economists in Indonesia to help with modeling and how that will work in reality. But I think that if the government can work on that and create a plan that makes sense to people, then that's probably going to be the point at which we can really start to see some cohesive and forward movement on this issue. Otherwise, it's probably just going to be provocateurs like Prof. Hasbullah and other people in the NGO community fighting and making small steps, but the general overarching institution staying the same. That's it from me. Oh, 0 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, for providing a very useful framework for us to start to understand the paradoxes that Professor Hasbullah explained to us. Now, it's Gilang's turn now to go more deeply into the evidence. The third provocateur. Speaker.
Thank you, Mas Firman. I just changed my title to Associate Provocateur, but hopefully with evidence for the afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for making the time to be in the 7th Mubyarto Public Policy Forum. I'm very excited to share some of the works that we've done with Mas Firman as well. And first of all, I'd like to thank several institutions who've supported the research. We have Top Economics at the University of Illinois, Chicago. We have the American Cancer Society. We have Survey Mirror and team. We have Bu Bondan here, but also Bu Wayan, Masudin, and everyone at Survey Mirror. And also World Bank Group. And I think without their support, this, I think, like high quality, rigorous research won't be possible. So just to start, I'm going to talk about the livelihoods of workers in the Indonesian tobacco sector before we, kind of like wrap up and then talk about some of the lessons learned for the formulation of tobacco control policies. To kickstart the discussion, we all know, and Professor Hasbullah, Elisabeth have, mentioned that there is a unsustainable economic burden on health systems and the society. And a recent study by colleagues from SISTI, they find that with the high prevalence of tobacco use, the healthcare costs of tobacco use in Indonesia were around 0.1 to 0.2 of the Indonesian GDP. And the total direct and indirect estimated economic loss was quite tremendous at more than 400 trillion rupiah. If we take a look at the share of the National Health Insurance Program that is attributed to smoking diseases, it's about 53 to 58%, which is quite high. And then the earmark tobacco tax revenue is not enough to actually cover all of the cost of smoking. So this is something that we need to pay attention to, in the long run. However, on the other hand, the tobacco industry continues to provide a narrative to justify the presence and the importance of tobacco industry and tobacco products in the economy. And as Elisabeth have mentioned, one of the central argument against a progressive tobacco control is the purported adverse effects that such policies, particularly tobacco tax, would actually impact the livelihood of workers in the Indonesian labor market. Now, we don't have data, a good natural experiment. We don't have longitudinal data to actually estimate the effects of any tobacco control policy, such as tobacco tax, on the livelihood of workers in the tobacco sector. It's one of the reasons why the narrative introduced by the tobacco industry is still alive, at least until a few years ago. Now, there is a growing literature on the livelihood of workers in the economy. We're started to learn about, kretek rollers. We're starting to learn about tobacco farmers and former tobacco farmers. We're learning about clove farmers and also workers in the tobacco industry overall. So the existing literature allow us to understand the livelihood of workers in the Indonesian tobacco sector, and we also want to try to understand what are the potential impacts of tobacco control policies, particularly tobacco tax, on the livelihoods of these workers. So I'm going to start with tobacco farmers, and this is some of the research that we've done with Mas Firman. So the core Indonesian tobacco sector are workers in the manufacturing sector. So these are kretek rollers, workers dealing with machines that produce tobacco products. We also have tobacco farmers. We also have clove farmers. There's actually a non-negligible share of households in the tobacco processing industry. So this is industry right after the harvest of tobacco. It's about curing, it's about storing, it's about preserving the tobacco before it goes into the manufacturing sector. So there's a lot of individuals in the manufacturing sector and also in the tobacco processing industry. And statistics show that there is about 700,000 tobacco farmers and about 1 million clove farmers. However, what we need to highlight is that these are not full-time equivalent. So for example, as a tobacco farmer, I can actually farm different crops at the same time. So if we take into account the fact that they have diversity in the crops, the number of full-time equivalent is significantly lower than what the statistics say. This is the same for clove farmers in the data. As Elisabeth has mentioned, one of the important features of the Indonesian tobacco sector is that it's concentrated in few regions in Indonesia, particularly in Java. So we have an enclave in Central Java, we have an enclave in East Java, and for tobacco farmers, we also have a non-negligible share in West Nusa Tenggara. So this is something that the government has to pay attention to, particularly when there is going to be a tobacco tax and the impact. So looking at the aggregate level, it's actually way different to what the tobacco industry has netted. If you look at the share of tobacco farming to GDP, it's quite low for the context of Indonesia. If we talk about the share of tobacco exports, it's also quite low. The majority of the tobacco that we use for producing cigarettes are actually imported from China. So the share of tobacco that is used domestically is actually quite low. And if we talk about the share of tobacco farming employment to total employment in the agricultural sector, it's also low, just around 1%. And if we talk about the overall farmers to overall employment, it's actually less than about 0.5%. So the share of workers, particularly tobacco farmers, to overall employment in the country is not that high. But again, there is that important feature that they're concentrated in few regions. And we have to think hard about some of the strategies that we can implement to shift them away from tobacco. And we have some of that in the lessons learned. So looking at the surveys that we've done with tobacco farmers, Bu Bondan and I have visited some of the farmers, and we did some focus group discussions. There's a lot of interesting aspects to it. So hopefully, some of the statistics that I'm going to present today will justify some of the important features of tobacco farming. So first of all, it's about the cost of tobacco farming. And I'm going to start with the agricultural input. So it's the fertilizers, it's the pesticides, it's the logwood, it's the gasoline used for tobacco farming and farming in general. So what we did in several of these surveys was that we take data on tobacco farmers, and we also take data from former tobacco farmers. Note that it's quite a dynamic decision to go into tobacco farming and to go out of tobacco farming, but in a given year, we try to compare costs from tobacco farmers as well as former tobacco farmers. And what we're seeing is that the median input cost for current tobacco farmers is, significantly higher, almost twice of that of the cost that is incurred by former tobacco farmers. And this is one of the reasons, and this is actually one of the things that is being overlooked by a lot of analysis, by economists, for example. They always argue that tobacco farming actually brings a lot of revenue, but they forgot that there's also a large cost associated with tobacco farming. And another cost associated with tobacco farming is the labor cost. Now, we can actually, differentiate labor costs into hired labor, also household labor. So in practice, in a lot of agricultural households, most of the workers are actually household labor. Now, we have to remember that household individuals in the households, they have opportunity costs. If they don't work for their tobacco farm, they can actually do other things. They could go into the construction sector. They could go and work in other, farm. They could do casual jobs that brings them wage. However, for household labor, usually they're unpaid. Now, what's interesting about tobacco farming is that they actually spend a lot of time tending tobacco, and particularly in what we call the bad year for tobacco farming, such as in 2016. It was wet during the harvest season, and so they have to continuously, try to clean the leaves to make sure that, to wipe out all the moisture and to keep the quality of the tobacco. Otherwise, it's actually going to be disadvantage when they sell the tobacco, when they cure the tobacco, and so on. And what we're seeing in the data is that the number of hours spent, the median number of hours spent by tobacco farming households is 5 times the household labor that is spent by non-tobacco farmers. This is quite significant. And when we take a look into the cost of hired labor, it's also significantly higher among tobacco farming households than non-tobacco farming households. Yeah. We're also quite lucky, given that now we have 4 waves of tobacco farmer survey, and it's a panel data following the same set of households, both the tobacco farmers and the former tobacco farmers. We can actually see their income from time to time, and we can actually see some of the effects of the shocks that occurred that also impacted the tobacco farming households and their profits and income. So this is an article that we wrote together, and we looked at how actually tobacco income fluctuates across year. And for example, we're looking at the context of Indonesia. We see that they're actually making losses in 2016, both among independent and contract farmers. One of the reasons for the loss that they incurred in 2016 was the relatively higher than average rainfall during that year. This is something that Mas Firman discovered, and then we decided, to put it into the model. What's interesting as well is that tobacco farming actually contributes not that high into the overall tobacco household income. So on the horizontal axis, this is the share of income derived from tobacco farming. And then on the vertical axis, this is the share of tobacco farming households. What we can see is that, for example, about 23% of tobacco households were actually deriving only 10% of their income from tobacco farming. And if you look at the data, I think less than 50% of the tobacco farmers are actually deriving about 20 to 30% of their income from tobacco farming. So what about the other income? It's coming from non-tobacco commodities that they have. They also have, wages that they get from working in other sectors. They also have some businesses that they, take care as also a side income. So this is evidence that tobacco farming it doesn't actually make up for the majority of the income for most tobacco farmers. We had an interesting, quasi-experiment where we take a look into the effect of tobacco farming on on households' income. So we were able to identify the share of land that the farmers dedicate for tobacco farming. So initially, we just model, the share of land and then tobacco, income. But then I think during one of the meetings with the team, Mas Firman mentioned, let's just, use rainfall and see what happens. And what's interesting is that since the 2016 harvest season for tobacco was actually quite bad because it was wet, farmers on average predict that 2017 is actually going to be a dry year for the harvest. And one of the reasons is that when we looked at weather data across year, it fluctuates, and there are years that after higher than average rainfall, it's going to be dry. And so they predicted that, and indeed in 2017, the weather was actually quite dry, and they were making actually a lot of money. So this T-1 rainfall actually predicts that they're going to be planting tobacco in the next season. And this is what we find. The model predicts that a percentage point increase in the share of land dedicated for tobacco reduces profit by about $333 per hectare, which is quite significant. And so in general, we find that there is a negative effect of tobacco farming on household income. What's interesting about the data that we have is that we're able to actually identify former tobacco farmers. What are the commodities that they plant, and then what are some of the jobs that they do in addition to not farming tobacco anymore. And so we find that alternative crops actually provide a good return for the median former tobacco farmers. And we're seeing that they're planting corn, they're planting chilies, they're planting vegetable, cashews, and stuff. One of the challenges in shifting away from tobacco is actually access to water. So in the dry season, their option is only to plant tobacco. Otherwise, it's going to be quite difficult to plant other commodities. So this is going to be tied to the policy recommendation that we can actually support farmers to plant tobacco in the dry season. This is just to show that, looking at two waves of data, we can actually track farmers, whether they stay tobacco farmers, whether they switch away from tobacco farming, or whether they actually enter tobacco farming. If we look at the most right figure, we see that those who actually switched away from tobacco farming, they're actually making more profits. Yes, there are self-selection and there is some endogeneity going on, in the data, but this is an evidence that actually moving away is actually better for tobacco farmers. And we're also, quite lucky that we were able to do household surveys on clove farmers and also workers in the tobacco industry, particularly the kretek rollers. And we have Pak Rimawan, Pak Elan, who's done works on petani cengkeh in the past, about the monopoly of the cengkeh. So this is actually probably not a follow-up, but provides an interesting insight as well. So the majority of clove farmers actually generated less than 20% of their income from clove farming. Again, like tobacco farmers, they're actually planting other commodities, given the land that they have. They're not, focusing all of their income on clove. They actually diversify and they have actually a portfolio. And we also find that the average clove farming household actually lost more than $2 per kilogram after incorporating household labor costs. And this is something that is actually quite common in agricultural household, is that they tend to not calculate the costs associated with farming. And this tends to overestimate the income and the profit that they receive from the farming activities. So from this study, we can predict that if there is a large economic shock to tobacco demand that would reduce the clove, they could actually have other commodities that they can rely to. And this is not from a household survey, but more on industry statistics. We use the IBS data, Industri Besar Sedang, also the Industri Menengah and Kecil data released by the Indonesian statistics. So what we find is that, yes, there is a non-negligible share of workers in the tobacco manufacturing sector. But when we think about tobacco manufacturing sector, we have to think that there is this cigarette kretek tangan, which are hand-rolled kretek, but there is also this machine-made cigarettes, whether it's kretek or it's white. And it's a totally different production technology. When we think about, the machine-made cigarettes, it's about machine, handing out tens of thousands of cigarettes within minutes. However, for, handmade cigarettes, we're talking about female workers, almost all of them, 98%, who are using this, not like automatic machines, but just using machines to, produce the cigarettes at a rate of about 4,000 within about 6 hours. With a wage of, varies. We find one that produces 4,000 for 50,000 rupiah, but there are other kretek rollers who produce 4,000 for 35,000 rupiah. So there are variation across the industry. What we're seeing is that, when we combine the data, because we cannot differentiate that in the data, the productivity is quite low. And what's interesting is that it's a female-dominated industry. And when we look at it, there is a male and female wage gap. And one of the potential explanations is that for the male workers, they're actually the one in the managerial sector, managerial level, whereas the female are actually the one at the production workers. At least this is what we see in the study of kretek rollers in some of the regions in Central Java and East Java. It's kretek rolling is actually not a main breadwinner in the typical household. It contributes quite significantly, about 50% of the income. But then what we're seeing is that this is something that they do not want to shift away from. One of the explanations is that there is actually not that much other economic alternatives that they can rely on other than working at the tobacco industry. So this is something that, they get up in the morning at 4:30, at 5 a.m., do the prayers, and then cook breakfast for the family. And by 6 a.m., they're already in the factory. And then by 11 a.m., they're already back in their household. They prepare the lunch for the family. They, do the ironing and stuff like that. At the same time, they're making money for the family. And so this is kind of like a good equilibrium that we have from a lot of these workers. And if there is any shocks into the tobacco industry, particularly on the demand for hand-rolled cigarettes, and these are the ones that are going to be significantly affected. So when we think about policy, we need to think about what are the economic alternatives to these individuals. And as Elisabeth has mentioned, it's not an easy thing to do. For example, if you go to Kudus, there's not much other alternatives. They have aspirations on what they want to do if they don't work into the industry sector. You know, they're thinking about being a tailor. But what happens if everyone in Kudus then becomes a tailor? That's going to be a general equilibrium effect and an economic issue at the same time. They cannot all then go into the food and beverage industry either as a merchant or as a producer. So this is again a very complicated issue, and we don't want to just try to highlight, hey, if we increase this tax, there's going to be some number of jobs lost, and we can try to reallocate some funds. No, we can. It's more complicated than that. So I will, in the remaining 7 minutes, just to share some of the lessons learned from tobacco taxation impact. So we did this simple simulation. It's a static simulation. It's not even a dynamic simulation. But even a static simulation could actually provide some insights that switching, higher tobacco tax will impact the labor sector, but not as high as we thought it would be. So we simulate raising cigarette taxes by an average of 47%. Again, we have a multi-tiered tax system in Indonesia, which is one of the most complicated in the world. And we also, at the same time, try to simplify the tiers to just 6. So such policy is simulated to reduce cigarette demand by just 2%. From the more than 350 billion cigarette that we consume every year. It's going to increase the government revenue by 6.4%, rightly so, because of the inelastic nature of cigarette. And we estimated that it's going to reduce gross employment in the tobacco manufacturing sector by less than 0.5%. So if we take a look at specifically at the kretek rollers, it is simulated to reduce employment by about 0.22%, or it's about 2,245 workers. And again, one of the policy option that the government could take is that, remember, there is this delta in the government revenue, an increase in the government revenue. And if we take a significant portion of that to support transitioning from tobacco industry to non-tobacco industry, I think that's something that the government could take. But again, it involves multi-stakeholders in the process. It's not only the Ministry of Finance, it's also the Ministry of Manpower, it's also the regional government, it's also the provincial government. So again, this is it's a complex process that there's a lot of studies to be done to understand the potential transition away from tobacco sector. And what about tobacco farmers? At least from the limited time that we have, looking at the data for tobacco farmers, we learned that switching away from tobacco farming actually provide better economic outcomes on average, at least. Yes, there are former tobacco farmers who may not be as well as the median former tobacco farmers who just switched away from tobacco, but at least there is that chance. And looking at some of the interactions with tobacco farmers, looking at the interactions with local offices of agriculture, switching away is possible, it's feasible. However, it's not like a one-off process where you just switch. There's a transition away, and they could potentially, in one particular year, go back to tobacco farming, or at least some of their land is going to be dedicated back for tobacco farming. Again, this is a dynamic process, and we have to support tobacco farmers on switching. One of the challenges is that the government already dedicated some of the funds to support the tobacco farmers to switch using the DBH CHT, Dana Bagi Hasil, Cukai Hasil Tembakau. The issue is that it requires the local office of agriculture, Dinas Pertanian, to budget programs in the next fiscal year to help farmers transition. However, Dinas Pertanian actually needs support on actually creating programs that would have farmers to switch away. So for example, in the context of Kabupaten Magelang, some farmers switch to coffee, Arabica coffee, which is some of our favorites. Some of them actually switched away from ubi cilembu, which they could actually export. So we're seeing that farmers taking risks to switch. Again, this is something that we need to support. In the drier season, particularly around April and September, October, this is the most challenging time for farmers to switch away from tobacco. In some regions in Magelang, in some regions in Jember, for example, it's quite dry. In West Nusa Tenggara, it's very dry during the dry season. They don't have access to irrigation as well as steady supply of water. So they rely on the leftover rain in April and May in the beginning of the season for the tobacco plants. But then they wish that there is no more rain until they harvest the tobacco. But if we can provide them with irrigation system, if we can provide them with supply of water, water reservoir and so on, we can actually support them to switch away from tobacco during the dry season. And lastly, also it's about information. What we learn not only from the study of tobacco farmers, but also from the studies of other farmers. They need information on what are other commodities that are actually demanded in the local market. So for example, if we go to Ketep in Kabupaten Magelang, they'd like to know, whether strawberries are demanded in Semarang or in Yogyakarta. They want to know whether it's pok choy or they want to know whether it's, other vegetables that are, demanded, so that they can actually decide the portfolio of crops that they'd like to plant in the next farming season. And if this information could be, transferred from local office of agriculture, pendamping petani, they're going to be benefited from this information. They can make better decisions. They can also try to access, the market directly instead of relying on what we call tengkulak or the middleman. And this is actually going to provide more values to the farmers when they sell their crops. So I guess I'd like to close the talk, and thank you so much for staying tuned on the Mubyarto public policy, and look forward to the Q&A session. Thank you, Mas Firman.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gumilang, for providing. Thank you, Gumilang, for providing some evidence from your studies. And now we move on to the question and answer session. I'm going to take 3 questions first from the room, and we also have some questions online. And it's okay to ask your question in Bahasa Indonesia. I will help to translate. Okay.
Baik, terima kasih. Karena diizinkan memakai bahasa Indonesia, saya izin memakai bahasa Indonesia saja, Pak. Perkenalkan, nama saya Humairah. Saya adalah mahasiswa Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis. Pertanyaan saya boleh dijawab oleh perwakilan atau semuanya, adalah dengan dicoretnya industri rokok dari daftar investasi negatif atau DIN, menurut Bapak dan Ibu, dampak apa yang akan timbul dari kebijakan tersebut? Demikian, terima kasih.
There's one. Amarilah. Umaina. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. My name is Ibrahim. I'm from Master of Law student, Constitutional Law. So my question, I'm direct to Miss Elisabeth. So if we talking about regulation to control the tobacco, of course, it's very simple for the House of Representatives to makes the regulation to prohibit nor tighten regulation. But in law perspective, we learn about socio-legal nor extra-legal factor like resistance from society. You know, the House of Representative is the biggest part to enacted the regulation. Nah,
Okay, so you provide the context. Now, the question, please.
How if the member of representation, they afraid if they loses the support from their voters?
Okay.
And the second question is how we can reduce the economic impact to small firms, warung kecil.
Yeah. Thank you. Great questions. One more from the audience. Okay, yes, please. Your name.
Thank you, Pak Firman. My name is Henny. It's just simple questions. It seems that the tobacco control is very complicated. And I just want to know what is the first step, our first stage that our government have to do to reduce the tobacco consumption. Thank you.
For consumption, okay.
Yeah, for consumption.
And you directed this question to all
everyone.
Okay,
can
great.
answer.
So, okay, we start with these three questions. First one from Umaina. What happened? What do you think would happen with now tobacco is off the negative investment list? Did anyone wants to start? Maybe we can start with Gilang.
Okay, thank you so much everyone for the questions. I guess I will start with Ibu Henny's first about what are the first steps that the government could actually do to actually reduce tobacco consumption. Again, this is not an easy answer. However, given the evidence that a lot of scholars have generated in the past decade, I think we're seeing that implementing a higher tobacco tax is even more possible. We address some of the narratives associated with the impact of raising tobacco tax. For example, the impact on workers, the impact on workers in the tobacco manufacturing sector, the impact of clove farmers. We generated those also evidence on the number of illegal cigarettes, illicit tax. So we're seeing those evidence, and raising tobacco tax, I think it's one of the most effective ways that the government can do to actually reduce tobacco consumption. But even before raising tobacco tax, I think there needs to be a coordination at the ministerial level. So we have ministries with different objectives. We have Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, who aims to reduce smoking and to improve health. We have the Ministry of Finance, trying to keep the revenue from tobacco tax. We have the Ministry of Manpower, who'd like to keep the number of workers in this industry. So we're seeing this ministries with different approach. So if the government is committed to reducing tobacco consumption, someone needs to take a lead and take a more active role in coordinating these different ministries. A loss in one particular KPIs of one ministry should be compensated with better KPIs from other, given that this is a national policy. So I guess that should be a coordination first before implementing a more progressive tobacco tax. Yeah.
Same question. Still, you want to answer, Liz and Prof, for this particular question before we move on to the next question?
We're answering the question about the first step, right? Yes.
Yep.
Actually, I'm not sure I can really improve on that response. I think the only thing that I would have to add is that for an issue that's as complicated as this, I think it really needs to come from the president themselves. The directive, whether it's ratifying the FCTC or coming up with a framework nationally within the Indonesian government that coordinates across ministries. I think that is the very first step, because without that, you can raise tobacco taxes, but then what is that? What about taps? What about tobacco advertising? What about smoke-free areas? What about impacts on children? So I think there needs to be a consensus that, you know, we have this shared common goal for the government, and yes, I think that needs to come from the president.
What was the question? How to start
What?
reducing?
This is the question about tobacco being on
the last one,
negative investment list, taking off. Yeah, if you want to answer this question.
I will respond the last one. How to reduce this consumption?
Oh, we were going to answer that later.
Oh,
I'm going through the questions first. So I guess that question is answered.
yeah.
Now we can. I'm going to go to Ibrahim first. If you did you answer the Ibrahim questions?
That's for Lisa. Yeah.
And then to you, Professor Hasbullah.
I didn't address the negative industry list, but I
don't
really have anything to say about that. So
okay.
I think there are other experts who know more about that than I do. But the question about how to approach DPR members who are afraid of voicing an opinion or losing support if they support tobacco control, I think that's the problem. That's part of the problem that stops effective tobacco control from being created. And this is an issue that we see with elected representatives across all kinds of issues, not just tobacco control. And I think what really needs, firstly, in a democracy, this isn't a one-way journey, right? It's not just voters telling DPR members what to do. In fact, I would argue that relationship is far from lineal. But it's also about political parties and politicians being open about what their beliefs are, being open about what their platforms are, and giving people an opportunity to vote them in because they believe in certain things that go beyond rhetoric, beyond nationalism, beyond religion. If you are a politician, if you can say specifically, in terms of manpower, this is what I think. In terms of tobacco control, this is what I think. And the demand for that needs to come from Indonesian citizens, right? As voters, you need to demand that the people who are running for different political offices, the president, the DPR, share their views openly on these topics so that you can make an informed decision about whether they are the best person to represent you or not. And I think if a politician goes to an election and says, yes, I support the tobacco industry, I don't support tobacco control, that's my stance, then at least you as voters know that that's what that person stands for, and as a decision about whether that represents your views or not. But I know that's a very idealistic answer to that question. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think too, another aspect, sorry, this is a long answer, another aspect is there needs to be more oversight and investigation about the influence that industry lobbyists have when it comes to the relationships that they have with people in the parliament. It's a black box sometimes. It's not public knowledge. You don't know who's meeting with politicians. You don't know what they're being offered. You don't know what kinds of deals are being made. And there's a role for investigation from different oversight bodies. It might not technically be corruption, so maybe other investigative or accountability bodies need to be aware that that's happening and need to be investigating it so that the influence of the industry is at least made public.
Yeah, I would like to respond the last question. Yeah, how to reduce this consumption. It is the very tough one to make sure that we first need a very strong president. But this kind of president will end next year. So we we have to elect the one. But I don't know who will be in favor of that, yeah, of the three candidates. Yeah. Because I observe in Indonesia, although we are always discuss that we are in democracy, but our democracy is still quote unquote. Whatever the president want to do, since the beginning, many follow. Yeah. So what we need is really a strong commander to do that. Evidence already there that will not be harmful badly for the farmer, for the labor, for the economy. That's clear. But who will be take that action yang berani ya? Certainly not me, because my name already Thabrany. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the first one. Second, we need also a minister of health who are actively campaigning against the tobacco advertising to balance that one. Yes, in the democratic societies, products, companies can advertise that one, but the government should contra advertising, contra promoting to make sure that people, hey, there is a product there, similar like the TikTok and the selling that one, yeah. Remember, that's not good. This one, you have to do this. Have you heard about that now? I don't have the experience watching a television channel or television program that people in the Ministry of Health actively warning that people, everybody, that one. So that's so I sent several times a letter to propose to the government. Yes, I think Gumilang right is. Currently, the one of the FCTC, the one is working the best, still the excise. Although still not optimal, as Lisa mentioning, the per capita income increasing faster than the cost of the cigarette, but still continues above 10% annually in the last 10 years. Inadequate. But we still need a stronger control on that. We know that from our survey that people will stop smoking if the price of cigarettes reaching 70,000 rupiah per pack. They will stop. In the 50,000, it's only about 60% will stop. So that's kind of study that we did already. So we suggest that increasing cigarette excise, there's still room for that. I think Gumilang also already studied. But earmark 10% for campaigning for healthy life. 10% is 24 trillion, quite big amount of money. So that's kind of balancing information. Then people will understand, okay, we can stop that one. The last one is to expand the upaya berhenti merokok, we call it UBM. That a lot of people want to stop smoking, that's already in trap, but they don't know how to stop. While in the health sectors, this service is also not good at this time. Yeah, this is what we need to do. Yeah. In response to the first question, negative place. That can be depending on the how big the incentive. At this time, if there is no strong control, I think many company can come, because at this time the this what the so-called industri udah waktu asar mau sunset industries, ya. In other countries not promising, yeah. And all smokers, decision control very hard. Only Indonesia that's a good environment for invest that one. It can be much more companies selling cigarette here, and the victim will be the people because they don't really understand the risk and the future risk. They will trap with all these goodies, good packaging, good communication scale, just to counter that action. The government should, if they want to invite investor, then they have to also protect people the most. I think Lisa mentioning that people should be the first. Right? Thank you.
We're going to move on to questions from online. I'm going to read some of them. So there's 2 comments and questions that are related from Ross McLeod, ANU, and Amrila in NTB, which is the evidence, and this puts you on the spot, Gilang. There's evidence that tobacco is profitable to farmers compared to other commodities. And Amrila further mentioned that with increasing tobacco prices, more farmers can shift to farming tobacco. And this is also related to Aryo Dopatudur. You only show input costs, and how about his question is what about profit? Because that's probably what matters. That's the first question. The second question from Amira Wahid. The question is directed to Pak Hasbullah and Dr. Kramer. What is the state of community-led or grassroots advocacy on this matter? The state of community-led or grassroots activity. And with the general election coming up, what are the chances that there's a support for a stricter law will be materialized? And for Gilang, question about whether cigarettes is domestic market all produced locally, could exporting Indonesia's most high quality cigarettes despite instead of consuming them sustain the industry? And the third question is, could anyone please comment on the positive or negative impact on farming communities in Java of the CSR programs run by tobacco companies? So now, can we start with Gilang to answer the question about profitability of tobacco farming, and then we move on to everyone. Okay, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Firman, and everyone from Zoom who's joined the session online. So regarding to the profits, yes. To construct profits, I think we need several ingredients. One of them, are the cost of tobacco farming. These are agricultural input. These are hired labor. And then the inclusion of household labor, which is actually quite important in comparing cost of tobacco and non-tobacco farming. And then we also need the revenue. So the revenues are a bit more complicated. So for a lot of tobacco farmers, it's not about revenues only for tobacco farming, but also income from revenue from non-tobacco commodities. So we have to sum all of that together, both for the tobacco farmers and then from the non-tobacco farmers. So what do we see in the data? So at least from the first wave and the second wave of data, so on average, tobacco farmers are making losses in the first wave. This is around 2016. And then in 2017, they're making a significant profit. So again, one of the reasons was that 2017 was a good year for tobacco farming. The prices of tobacco leaves were quite high in 2017 per kilogram. And then the grading was actually quite favorable for the tobacco farmers as well. At the same time, the costs are relatively similar for a kilogram that they produce. At the same time, for the former tobacco farmers, so in 2016, just barely making profits, but then in 2017 17, the profits that they get actually increased. So what we're seeing here is that yes, tobacco farming is profitable, but again, there is this variation across years that we have to pay attention to. In some year, it could be quite bad, and it's actually more profitable on average to do non-tobacco farming. But then even in the good year, the former tobacco farmers are on average making a bit better than tobacco farmers. So this is what we're seeing. It's not shown in the presentation. You know, I think retrospectively I should have shown the profits of these tobacco farmers. I guess that's around the profit. Mas Firman, any other should I?
Yeah, and then there's yeah, we can move on to the next question. It's the state of community-led. The state of community-led. You and yeah. Yeah.
Much better place to talk about the state of community-led and grassroots advocacy on the matter. So I'll leave that to you. But with the general elections coming up, what are the chances that there will be support for a stricter law? Well, I mean, when you're talking about laws and what's happening in the DPR versus what's happening in ministries that are mandated to create regulations on tobacco control, you're talking about two very different sets of circumstances. But I guess what could be possible from the DPR might be, or from the President's office might be, ratifying the FCTC or coming up with some other comparable framework for Indonesia. Personally speaking, I don't see that being a big issue in the upcoming election. Maybe Prof. Hasbullah has a different perspective. It hasn't been a big issue in previous elections, and I think just with the nature of this election, because Jokowi has done his 2 terms, we've got a new slate of candidates who are vying for the presidency. I think a lot of the election space and white noise will be taken up by those competing parties and interests rather than tobacco control. I think tobacco control might be somewhere a bit further down the list. And I mean, traditionally speaking, when it comes to elections, whenever there's an election year, tobacco regulations from the ministry, at the ministry level, tend to slow down or they tend to be passed over. So election years are not generally good years for tobacco control.
Yeah, first on the grassroots level. There have been very low activities, sorry to say, on the grassroots level on these issues in tobacco control. That because in general, people in Indonesia still perceive smoking is normal behavior. Even traditionally, sorry to say, in pesantren, the kiai, the one who have a strong model, the smoking is becoming kind of norm. Only Muhammadiyah is brave enough to say smoking is haram. The other big NU, to speak correctly, don't have that got to say smoking haram or prohibited. So that's no feeling of the pressure unless there is cases. For example, a couple months back, I visited Tebu Ireng. Is it Tebu Ireng? Yeah, in Jombang. Actually, they already move ahead banning smoking, any smoking if santri get smoker, caught smoking in the pesantren, they kick out. Yeah, they don't allow. That because before that, the leader of the pesantren, I think older brother of Gus Dur, suffered from cancer, lung cancer, and doctor said, well, that's because you smoke too much. And then he said after that, no smoking allow in this pesantren. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, and Kediri also they have licensing. They have SIM, surat izin merokok by the santri, where the surat izin is coming from the parents. Only when they are already above 18, they can smoke, but still need to. Most of the pesantren school don't have that kind of behavior. So not feeling as something wrong. Therefore, community activity is still very minimal this time. What about the next leader? This is still unclear for me. I don't see so far any big promise, on this issue, because it's also danger for them. To my knowledge, the profitability of cigarette industries, not the farmer, not the labor, the investor, the company is very big. As I show you the return on investment of the cigarettes quite high. They are almost 100% in 1 year. With that flexibility, I'm afraid during this campaign, both for the presidents and the elective local DPR, they support everything, yeah, in order to gain their support in other sense. So that's very common. We don't know, although we don't have the evidence, hard evidence, as in Indonesian saying, ada asap, pasti ada api. We know there is smoke, but we cannot see the fire, yeah, like di Tanah Gambut. That's very clear. They will support many activities supporting art, music, sport, and so on. So people have a perception they are a good guy. That's the CSR that they give us. Certainly they do. They are not selling a good product, healthy product, even in many TikTok, they call it, or social media, they've been circulation that the seller of rokok, they prohibit their family to smoke, but they're selling this cigarette. Yeah, they know that there is, but money are much more, what do you call it? Much more important for them compared to the health effect or the future effect of health. So this is what we worried, but I don't know if you're talking which candidate can do better, or whether the parliament member or Congress or DPR, new DPR will do it. This year we map out that only 4 or 5 of the anggota DPR, the parliament member, are in favor of tobacco control. Very minimum, yeah. Sorry to say. That's our work, hard work. Yeah, thank you.
So we have actually time for around in person, and then we have tons of questions online. Yeah. Oh yeah, okay, please.
I'll get it by the end. One of the questions that's popped up, I think, from a fellow provocateur.
Oh,
Yeah. Are we going to have time?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
One right in person. Okay. Yes. 1, 2, 3. So, yeah. First, then.
My name is Amelia. I'm just a layman here, no affiliation at all. One fact that I learned from here is that smoking is cultural, especially in Indonesia. Pak Thabrany said that ulamas are smoking while giving their sermons, and then Ms. Kramer also said that there is some kind of nationalism that imbibes in smoking. And especially in the coming Netflix film, I think there will be Gadis Kratek that kind of, in my humble opinion, is also romanticizing the act of smoking. And then decades of astroturfing, of lobbying the public policy to kind of painting the smoking as a positive image. What do you think is the policy choices that that can combat this positive image, and what are the considerations? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Firman. I'm Evita Pangaribowo from Environmental Geography Department. My question is for Mas Gilang. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether you also look at the intra-household dynamics of the tobacco farming household, since how actually the labor diversification in tobacco production, how the income are translated in certain expenditure, to look at into more detail in the micro context, so that we can have more alternatives, livelihoods strategy for the tobacco farming household. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all three speakers for excellent presentation. So my first is actually just a brief comment to Professor Hasbullah on that cash transfer BLT actually subsidize the smoking behavior. I think more recent studies shows that solid evidence that at least that at best actually a correlation more rather than causality. I think more evidence now, very solid evidence shows that cash transfer, conditional or unconditional, is actually not really evidently increase the smoking behavior. In fact, even if we found that in some exception, if we found that yeah, in some cases perhaps like cash transfer might increase the smoking behavior. So I think that the decision is perhaps not to stop the cash transfer because you know, the smoker is the father, and if you stop the cash transfer, definitely you punish the children, the mother, and things like that. So I think yes. So that's why I think more recent cash transfer, we switch the main beneficiaries from anyone, including father to mother, and that's somehow actually reduce the probability of that correlation with the increased behavior. The second question is actually related with so we have the study including with Gumilang that shows that there is some evidence on the crowding out effect of the smoking. And so it seems to me that if we only rely on the price policy instruments like so if this I'm not sure, perhaps Elisabeth can share the evidence from other countries. So if this crowding out effect of the tobacco consumption actually exists, so and we saw that actually it exists in Indonesia, so it seems to me that the policy instruments should not just rely on the tax on the price instruments. So it's like more comprehensive. And I agree. At the end, 100,000 per pack. The cost of, so definitely we need multiple policy instruments to control the consumption. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So yeah, we can start answering question from Amalia first about the romanticizing cigarette, how to address that. Who wants to go? Dr. Kramer, you seem to be the one who's interested to answer. Yeah.
On the positive image. So when I was growing up, I'm a little bit older, in Australia, all of the cool kids at high school were smokers. If you wanted a reputation of being a particular kind of teenager, smoking was what you did. Now, my younger brother is 9 years younger than me, and none of his friends smoked. I think it's very rare to find somebody of his age who's taken up smoking in the period between when I was a teenager and when he was a teenager. So that's a personal anecdote, but I think it kind of reflects the generational change that happened in Australia when they cut out advertising, sports sponsorship, which was a really huge part of tobacco promotion in Australia, and then moving towards not just the higher prices, which of course, as a young person, to pay for cigarettes that cost $40 a packet is, it's a big commitment, a big financial commitment. I don't think that a lot of teenagers have that much money. There is the side issue of vaping and e-cigarettes, which I'll put to one side for now. But I think the combination of all of these things just made smoking a lot less appealing. You didn't have that advertising that was planting the seed of smoking in your head, making it look cool. You didn't have, it attached to sports or other kinds of activities. And now when you go to buy cigarettes, because you can still buy cigarettes, it's a legal product, but when you go to buy them, there's no packaging. We have plain packaging in Australia, so there's no bright colours, there's no logos. When you go in to the supermarket or the shop, it's behind a cabinet. You can't see the different brands. You have to tell the person at the counter, I want this brand, and then they take it out of the cupboard for you, but at no point are you exposed to any kind of advertising or branding in that process. So, and that's probably one of the strictest restrictions that you have globally, but it's those kinds of things that I think, I don't know, like this is not a scientific opinion, but I think teenagers are not super, when it comes to things like this, they're kind of lazy. If you put enough barriers in front of them, they'll give up and do something else. So it's about creating those barriers.
Thank you. And it's discussing all of you about the importance of campaigning, the importance of advertising, of the leaders and the business. So you not often still have to answer. Question from Vita, and there's about intra-household dynamics, and then perhaps Prof. Hasbullah want to speak a little bit about and then we go to only one question from online. Go.
Thank you so much, Mbak Evita, for the question. We don't have a very thorough data, a very detailed data on intra-household labor. We identify individuals in the households who work either at the farm, tobacco farming. We also identify workers who work, for example, at other endeavors. They could be working for other farming, could be tobacco farming, could be non-tobacco farming. They could also be working for businesses that they have at their home or works in other sector, such as, for example, in the construction sector and so on. We also have the age of these households as well as the gender. So given that insight, yes, we could learn something about who are working and who are the households dedicated for tobacco farming. But then understanding about what the economic sectors that they can approach is going to be dependent on the local region. For example, the opportunities that we have in Kabupaten Magelang, for example, is quite limited. So they have to migrate to be able to get work given their skills and given their education. And similar in Jember, for example, the local labor market may not necessarily absorb the labor other than the tobacco farming and the farming itself. So I guess in general, given the data, what we can conclude is that yes, there are other economic opportunities. One is going to be on farming and the neighboring farmers, but also to go outside of the region, migrate. It could be a temporary migration. It could be a more permanent one to get opportunities given their education and skills.
Okay, great. So we only have one more question, and I think one of you can comment and you can see later. But one from Asia Lemon about the policy lessons from Australia, I think has been answered by Dr. Kramer. So this question, last question from online from Ikan Mubyarto from the Cabinet Secretary of Republic of Indonesia, to Pak Hasbullah and Pak Gumilang, but I think we can answer as well. Do you think the recent health law and probably also the recent health reforms is sufficient to control the thing? That's the final question.
Start with the end because they can cover Elan and others. Yeah, I see in the health law that the law itself not adequately addressing the tobacco control or fighting for addiction. But if I read the draft of RPP, government regulation, actually the draft's already comprehensively good to cover to reduce smoking, to twist back the understanding and so on, following. Actually, what the NCTC offer is the so-called empower. It's comprehensive. It's not only one action such. Yes, price is the best instrument, best evidence to impact people because everybody want to have the low price. But price is in the empower is the last one, which is we already good enough on this. And we are good enough on the other and the first word, empower, monitor. Yeah, in monitoring, what we are doing actually monitoring. Then we are already good enough. Academician did that. The second one, to protect, that's still not good enough for us. To protect people from buying cigarette by the affecting, making effective. Control, yeah, of smoking, selling cigarette in Batangan, for example. That's still people buying Batangan, and they say parents not educated to not to let the kid smoking and so on. So that's the second one is not good one. The protect, the offer to quit smoking also not good enough, although it's still already there. Yeah, the offer that the next one empower provide warning. The warning we already did with this graphic warning, but still too small, 40% only. If you buy Indonesian cigarette in Nepal, the graphic warning is 90% of the box. Yeah, so they follow when we have that. That's because we are not enforced. So that's still lacking also with us. Yeah. So that's in the middle of this empower is not good enough. We are already good enough in monitoring and raising taxes, although not very optimal, but still continues. That's good enough. So this is the situation. But I believe the more event like this we organize, the more people exposed. And if the draft of RPP of the current health law, law number 17, been implemented or not cut by other ministry, because there's complexities. That's probably we'll see. If we look at the history in Australia, after 5-10 years, then we can see the declining of tobacco smoking. And good, Pak Elan already also connecting this and monitoring the BLT recipient PM smoking behavior. That's already good enough. Yeah. Okay. You.
What was the question? Oh.
Sorry.
So, well, that concludes our event. I need to let you know that we have at our peak around 120 people online, and this event is also recorded and it's going to be uploaded to our website. Thank you so much for everyone, to all the speakers, to all the organizers, and all the audience who stays and participates. Thank you.
Okay, before that, I want to say thank you for all the moderators and the speakers for today.